All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone joining this meeting today from different parts of the world. I am Sweta Dixit. I am currently a PhD candidate at North Carolina State University in the US. My research focuses on endangered species conservation and communications around endangered species. And I have been affiliated with ClimatEducate Project for the past 9 years, almost since its beginning. And I have been the advocacy head for Nepal, and I am also the former chief director of ClimatEducate Project, where I got an experience to work alongside incredible youth who worked in building climate education programs for their own communities as well as for youths across multiple countries. So, in many ways, I can say that I live at the intersection of science, education, and advocacy. And I have found that these three things, when they come together, can be genuinely powerful. But before I talk about all of that, before I talk about any sort of my research area or programs that we have done or all the advocacy that we have done through Climate Educate Project, I want to start somewhere more personal because everything I do, every reason I am standing here today traces back to this place. It traces back to home. And when I say home, it is Nepal. For those of you who don't know, Nepal is a small country in South Asia that lies between China in north and India in the south. And as you can see in the picture, it is a country of extraordinary mountains, hills, rivers, and a lot of forests, right? And Nepal has has some of the most remarkable biodiversity on earth. And growing up in Nepal, the Himalayas and the foothills weren't just a backdrop, they were home to me, right? And my grandmother used to tell me, she used to describe the rivers that used to get so full in summer that you could hear them from the road. Little me could not imagine that. Farmers also knew exactly when the monsoon would start, right? Because they always had, and because the monsoon always did, right? But talking to them now, I can certainly say that all of that is gone. The monsoon is unpredictable. The celebrations that were supposed to happen during the start of monsoon still happens, but like a celebration. And the monsoon, they do not know when the monsoon would start. It's unpredictable, right? The Nepal's glaciers from the snow-capped mountains are retreating at rates the scientists call unprecedented, and we have heard that term a lot. The monsoon patterns that entire agricultural system depends on are becoming erratic and unpredictable. Glacial lake outburst floods are washing away villages that survived centuries. And here is the number I cannot stop thinking about. Nepal contributes less than 0.1% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Less than 0.1% contribution. Let that sink in. And yet it ranks among one of the most climate vulnerable nations in the world. I want to be clear here. This is not just the story of Nepal. In the Philippines, across Southeast Asia, super typhoons are intensifying beyond anything historical records prepared the communities for. Coastal villages are disappearing as sea levels rise. Coral reefs that fishing communities has depended on for generations are bleaching and dying. In sub-Saharan Africa, shifting rainfall patterns are turning farmlands into dust. The Sahel is expanding. Coastlines are retreating. Entire pastoral ways of life are collapsing in different countries. Right? In Bangladesh, in Indonesia, the Mozambique, in Ethiopia, the pattern still remains the same. And the people most exposed to climate devastation are the people contributing least to creating all of this. What strikes me most looking across all of these places is that the communities observing the highest consequences are often the ones that lived the most gently on this earth. You can see on this map, there's something deeply uncomfortable in that truth, right? And I think sitting with that discomfort is actually where meaningful climate education and meaningful climate advocacy actually begins. Which brings me to a pattern I keep returning to in my research, in my advocacy work, in education, and in everything I've learned building climate education programs over the past several years through ClimatEducate Project. We tend to think of climate change as a shared challenge. And in one sense, don't get me wrong, it is a shared challenge. The atmosphere doesn't recognize borders, right? But when you start looking at where the impacts are concentrated and where they're not, a pattern starts to emerge that is really hard to ignore. As you can see on the map, the regions experiencing most severe climate disruption, like rising seas, intensifying storms, failing harvests, disappearing glaciers, are often places that industrialized much, much later, that consume far less energy per person, and that have had much less time to accumulate the kind of wealth that makes adaptation possible. Right? And the regions, the lighter color regions on the map that have been the longest industrial, that have had the longest industrial histories, the highest energy consumption, and the most accumulated resources, right? They are experiencing climate impacts too, because I wouldn't say they do not have any climate impacts. Again, because atmosphere doesn't recognize borders, the impacts are everywhere. But these light colored countries have far greater capacity to respond to the impacts. They have better infrastructure, they have better early warning system, better insurance even, and they have more options and thus more time to adapt or mitigate these issues. Well, I'm not trying to draw conclusions for you, but I think when educators and advocates understand this pattern, when we really sit with it, it changes how we talk about solutions. I think it shifts the conversation from everyone needs to do their part to something more nuanced, where we ask who has the capacity to act and are they actually acting at the scale that their capacity allows them to, right? That question, I think, is one of the most important ones in climate education or climate advocacy. Now, I want to take a step back from the human story for a moment. Not because it's not urgent, but because I think we consistently undersell how vast this crisis truly is. As a PhD researcher focused on endangered species and biodiversity conservation, I spend a lot of time thinking about the parts of this crisis that don't make headlines. And what I've come to understand is that climate change is not one threat to the natural world. It is not a single threat, right? It is a threat multiplier, meaning that it takes the pressure, it takes every pressure that the ecosystem is already under and it amplifies it. It makes it worse, right? It pushes species out of their habitats that have been evolved in over millions of years. It shifts the time of flowering and pollination, breaking relationship between the plant and the pollinators that took millennia to form. It warms ocean temperatures, bleaching coral reef that supports roughly 25% of all marine life. Right? These are the impacts, these are the before and after impacts that you can see as a result of climate change. And it is sad. In the Himalayas, the snow leopard is losing its habitat, and as the temperatures are warming and the tree lines are pushed because of the warming temperatures, and the cats are literally running out of mountains now. There's no higher elevation from there, right? The red panda, which depends on bamboo forest within very specific temperature range, is watching its food source shift and shrink. The Gangetic dolphin, the Bengal tiger, all of them, all of these animals here, they're not abstract statistics. Their habitat is actually declining. They have to move from one place to another as a result of the shift in climate. And all of if these species disappear, it would create a huge ripple effect throughout the entire ecosystem in ways we are just beginning to understand. Here's what I want to clarify though. I don't study animals, or I'm not trying to bring in biodiversity conservation and saving animals into climate change education just because I think they're beautiful. Although, I mean, we can say they are beautiful, right? But we are talking about the integrity of the whole ecological systems that clean our water, stabilize our soil, pollinate our food, and regulate our climate. It's not just about Nepal or a small country or even a small place. We're looking at it from a very large holistic perspective. And biodiversity loss and climate change, I don't think they are two separate things or two separate crises running in parallel. Right? They are the same crisis. It just depends on how we see the crisis as a whole. So this means that climate change, climate education, climate advocacy has to hold all of these elements together. The human stories, the ecological stories, the justice dimensions, right? It cannot address just one of these. You cannot pick and choose one of these and leave out the others behind. And honestly, I think this is what makes our job as climate educators and advocates so demanding. It's not like we're teaching a single subject. We are asking people to see a crisis that is simultaneously environmental, economic, social, moral, everything all at once, right? And we're asking them to feel the weight of it without actually being paralyzed by it. And that I don't think is an easy work, and I'm sure you understand that. But it definitely is a necessary work. And it is something I learned not from textbook, but from trying to build programs to provide education to youths and community members from the ground up. And in my experience, the people most willing to hold all of this complexity, to sit with the weight of it and still stand up, show up, still build, still teach, have overwhelmingly been young people, have been youths, all people like you. But I've also lost count of how many times I've heard the phrase, young people are the future. I understand the sentiment. I do, right? But I really want to push back on it gently but firmly. Because when we frame youths as the future, we implicitly say, your role as youth is to wait. Your job is to inherit the decisions that we make. Yes, your voice matters, but later, right? And that framing has a big consequence. It excludes young people from the spaces where climate decisions are made. It treats youth led organizations as feel good initiatives or volunteer initiatives that students do for resume, maybe, right? Rather than serious contributions to solutions, to decision making. And it ignores something I have witnessed firsthand. Young people are not waiting for a future crisis, they are living through the present one. I was a teenager when I first became involved in climate advocacy in ClimatEducate Project. I did not get involved to build a resume, but because I knew that I was inheriting a world um, that where which was kind of shaping in a way that I did not have a say in, but I had knowledge. I was in my undergrad studying environmental science, learning about all of this crisis. I definitely had the energy, and I also had different ideas of what we could do, how we could involve young people, how we could involve local communities who bear the most cost. And I wanted to be useful, right? As a former chief director of the ClimatEducate Project, I worked alongside other young leaders to design climate education programs for the general public. We organized education programs, built networks, created platforms across multiple countries. We kept on adding people from different countries. We wanted to build network with these different countries. And we did not wait for anyone's permission to do that, right? COVID didn't stop us. You can see events in 2020, 2019, 2021, right? That was the time I'd say that we were active the most. We were doing a lot of online advocacy. And all of these programs are still running today, right? They're being carried forward by other young directors, other young people who believe in themselves just enough to keep going, to keep pushing on advocacy, to keep pushing on education. And what I've learned through all of this is that the most powerful thing a young person brings to this work, to advocacy and education, is not their technical knowledge, although they can bring the technical knowledge. It's also not experience that they bring. They're still young, we're still learning, right? But it is just the simple fact that the future we are fighting for is not abstract to us. It is the life we are actually about to live. It is near, and that makes the work feel very different. So, to the educators in the room, I'm asking you not just to teach climate change, not just to teach about climate change, right? I am asking you to treat young people as partners in that teaching. I want you to bring them to the front of the room, front and center. Give them decision making power. Don't just make them a passive audience, give them an active voice. Because the most effective climate education programs I've seen are the ones that have been built by young people and not just for them. And ClimatEducate Project is one of the best examples of that. Again, I want to reiterate, we are not the future generation. We are the present generation. And what we built through ClimatEducate Project is a proof that when young people are trusted, or when young people take the responsibility, feel the real responsibility, they deliver real results. So let me close by saying that if you're an educator attending this meeting, try to integrate not just climate science, but also the human dimensions of this crisis into what you teach. Build curricula that ends with pathways, with some things learner can actually take actions on. They can carry out their door, they can do something about it. If you work in civil society or policy, bring young people in at the design stage. Bring them from the very start, from the planning stage. Don't wait to just hear their opinion on the decisions that you've already made. And it is not just as a demographic consult. Don't just bring them as a demographic consult, but as partners to build with. And if you are a young person in this room, I'd like to say your urgency is not naivety. Your desire to act now is not impatience, but it is clarity. The crisis is present tense, and so is the solution, right? We have everything we need to build a different world. What we need now is the willingness to treat this moment, not just some faraway future moment, as the one that matters. Thank you so much for listening to me, and I hope you have a great rest of the meeting. Thank you.